On the morning of February 17th, 2008, a 24-year-old woman named Marilyn Bergeron told her mother she was going out for a walk. It was the kind of sentence families hear every day. "I'm going for a walk. I'll be back soon." Nothing about it sounds final. Nothing about it sounds like the last thing anyone will remember clearly. But Marilyn did not come back. Later that morning, she appeared on surveillance footage at an ATM in Loretteville. She tried to withdraw money, but the transaction was declined. Hours after that, she used her credit card to buy coffee at a Café Dépôt in Saint-Romuald, across the river from Quebec City. A witness said she was alone. And then, after that cup of coffee, Marilyn Bergeron disappeared. No confirmed goodbye, no confirmed destination, no confirmed trace of where she went next. What makes this case so unsettling is not only that Marilyn vanished in the middle of an ordinary day. It is what happened before she vanished. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, Marilyn had left Montreal suddenly and returned to her family's home in Quebec City. She told people close to her that something had happened. She said she no longer felt safe, but she never fully explained why. For her family, this has never been just a mystery. It has been 18 years of searching, hoping, pushing, and trying to make sure Marilyn does not become just another name on a missing persons list. So today we are going to talk about Marilyn Bergeron, not just the day she vanished, but who she was before that day. The music she loved, the dreams she had, the life she was building, the culture around this case in Quebec, the frustrations her family has raised about missing adult investigations, and the question that still sits at the center of it all. What happened to Marilyn after she bought that coffee? Before we get into the details, I want to be clear about something. Marilyn Bergeron is a real person, not a character in a mystery. Her family has spent years looking for answers, and there are still people who love her, miss her, and hope for information. This case includes law enforcement theories, family beliefs, public tips, and unconfirmed sightings. I'll separate confirmed facts from speculation as clearly as possible. Marilyn Bergeron was born on December the 21st, 1983, in Chicoutimi, Quebec. Long before her name was attached to a missing persons case, she was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a creative young woman trying to figure out the shape of her future. She grew up in Quebec, and her family later moved to the Quebec City area. From a young age, Marilyn was drawn to music. Around the age of 10, she began taking music lessons, and that love of music followed her into her teenage years. At school, she was remembered as someone who wanted to start bands, someone who had that restless, creative energy that does not always fit neatly into one path. That matters, because when a person disappears, the public often meets them only through the worst day of their life. A blurry photo, a height and weight, a last seen location, a list of identifying features. But Marilyn had a life before she became a case. She had interests. She had a personality. She had plans. She was curious about the world. Reports about her life describe her as someone interested in cultures and languages. She spoke French and English, had studied some Spanish, and had even started learning Russian. That detail has always stood out to me because it says something about her sense of possibility. Marilyn was not only thinking about where she was thinking about where she might go. After high school, Marilyn studied media arts and technology at Cégep de Jonquière. That path fits with the picture people have painted of her: creative, interested in sound, music, media, and movement. Later, in Montreal, she worked at Steve's music store and did freelance sound editing work for local television stations. She was also training in finance at Industrial Alliance. You see, Marilyn was not one thing. She was creative and practical, interested in music and media, but also looking at financial training. One reported dream was to become a flight attendant and eventually move to Western Canada. She was a young woman in her 20s, trying on futures: Montreal, music, work, travel, and a life that was still moving. Family descriptions also suggest Marilyn had an independent streak. Like a lot of people in their early 20s, she had uncertainty, friendships her family may not have always understood, and choices that worried people who loved her. But none of that makes her disappearance less urgent. When missing adults are judged instead of searched for, their stories shrink. Marilyn deserves to be seen in full. In 2005, Marilyn moved to Montreal. To understand part of the culture around this case, you have to understand what Montreal can represent for a young person from Quebec: music, students, artists, language, reinvention, and anonymity. For someone like Marilyn, who loved music and wanted a life with movement, Montreal could have felt like opportunity. But by early 2008, something had changed. Marilyn began telling her family that she no longer felt safe living in Montreal. She did not explain exactly what had happened. According to CBC reporting, the family's lawyer, Mark Bellemare, said Marilyn had told her mother that something happened and that she worried about her safety in Montreal. Her mother, Andrée Béchard, said Marilyn never elaborated. That silence is one of the hardest parts of the case. It creates a space people naturally want to fill. Was she afraid of someone? Had she witnessed something? Had something happened to her personally? Was she struggling emotionally? We do not know. What we do know is that Marilyn's behavior worried the people around her. A friend who knew her in Montreal later said she had become fearful and reclusive in the months before she vanished. According to reporting and family discussions, when people asked whether specific things had happened to her, she did not provide a clear explanation. One reported statement was that what happened was worse, but she still would not say what it was. That detail is easy to sensationalize, so it has to be handled carefully. We do not know what Marilyn meant. We only know people close to her believed she was genuinely distressed. On February 10th, 2008, Marilyn left Montreal and returned to her family's home in the Quebec City area. In the days that followed, her family helped her move belongings from Montreal. By February 16th, she was back with her parents. Then came February 17th. February 17th, 2008 was a Sunday. According to her mother, it was a spring-like day. Marilyn said she was going out for a walk and would be back in a few hours. People go for walks when they need air, space, or a moment to calm their mind. Marilyn had just left one city and returned to another. She was in a vulnerable moment, and a walk might have sounded normal. But there are details that make that morning difficult to understand. Marilyn reportedly left most of her identification behind. She had a credit card, but not the usual full set of things someone might take if they were planning to leave permanently. Reports say she was wearing a long black coat with a gray fake fur trim and suede boots. At 11:09 a.m., according to the Quebec City police timeline, Marilyn went to an ATM at a Caisse Populaire on Boulevard de Lormière in Loretteville. She tried to withdraw money. Other reporting says the amount was $60 and the transaction was declined. The ATM footage has become one of the central images of this case. People often focus on the way Marilyn appears to look around or behind her, but video without context can be misleading. A person can look over their shoulder for many reasons. Still, given what Marilyn had told her family before she vanished, the footage has understandably raised questions. Was she watching for someone? Was she expecting someone? Did she already know where she was going next? At this point, there is another question. How did Marilyn get from the Quebec City area to Saint-Romuald? The official timeline places her at Café des Pots in Saint-Romuald at 4:03 p.m. That location was on the South Shore, across the St. Lawrence River, roughly 20 to 21 kilometers from the family home area, depending on the route. It is possible to imagine a long walk, but it is also possible she got a ride, took public transportation, hitchhiked, or moved in some other way investigators have not publicly confirmed. At the cafe, Marilyn used her credit card to buy coffee. A witness said she was alone at that moment. After that, Marilyn's credit card was not used again, and there has been no confirmed sighting of her since. When Marilyn did not return home that evening, her family reported her missing. This is where a missing person case becomes a race against time, but also a collision between family fear and investigative procedure. Families often know immediately when something is wrong. Systems can move differently, especially when the missing person is an adult. In Marilyn's case, Quebec City police traced her movements through banking records to the ATM and the cafe. Her family also began searching. They printed flyers, kept her face in the public eye, and pushed the case into the media. Later, organizations like Sun Youth, the Missing Children's Network, and AFPAD became connected to public efforts around the case. Over the years, there have been different theories about what happened to Marilyn. Quebec City police have reportedly considered the possibility that Marilyn died by suicide. Because of YouTube's safety and out of respect for Marilyn and her family, I am not going to discuss methods or graphic possibilities. The important point is that law enforcement has treated that as one possible explanation. Her family has never accepted that as the answer. They have argued that Marilyn's fear of Montreal, her unexplained distress, and the lack of closure leave open the possibility that someone else was involved. The family has publicly said they believe something criminal may have happened, including the possibility of kidnapping or murder. There is also the possibility, raised by later reported sightings, that Marilyn may have survived and lived elsewhere after 2008. Her family has said that if Marilyn is alive and chose a new life, they would respect her privacy. They have made it clear that what they want most is to know she is safe. Those three broad possibilities, suicide, foul play, or voluntary disappearance, are often discussed online. But none has been proven publicly. That is part of why Marilyn's case has stayed alive in true crime spaces. It does not fit neatly into one category. It sits in a painful gray zone where every answer seems possible, but none is confirmed. One of the biggest developments in public discussion of the case involves possible sightings in Ontario, especially in Hawkesbury. Hawkesbury is important geographically and culturally. It is in eastern Ontario, near the Quebec border, and it has a significant francophone presence. For someone from Quebec who wanted to remain near familiar language and culture, but outside the same police and social circles, a place like Hawkesbury would naturally attract attention in this case. In 2022, Global News reported that Marilyn's family and their lawyer believed she may still have been alive in Ontario after her disappearance. A man named Guy Salico came forward publicly with an account from December 2009. He said a young woman came to his home in Hawkesbury late at night, around 2 or 3 a.m., asking for directions. He described her as cold, frail, wet from the rain, polite, and speaking fluent English. He said he and his partner did not realize who she might be at the time, and only later connected her to Marilyn after seeing media coverage. According to that reporting, the family's lawyer said there were more than 20 credible tips from Eastern Ontario in 2009 and 2010 from people saying they saw Marilyn. That word, credible, is important, but it does not mean confirmed. A tip can be worth investigating and still not prove that the person seen was Marilyn. Memory can be sincere and still be wrong. Recognition can be powerful and still be uncertain. People can resemble each other. But for Marilyn's family, these sightings were enough to keep hope alive. And hope, in a missing person case, is complicated. It can keep a family moving. It can also keep them from grieving. It can be a lifeline and a wound at the same time. Marilyn's disappearance also became part of a larger conversation in Quebec about how missing adults are handled. This is one of the most important parts of the case because it moves beyond one person and into what families are expected to do when the system does not give them answers. Marilyn was 24. She was an adult. In many places, when an adult disappears, investigators have to balance privacy rights with urgency. Adults are allowed to leave, cut contact, and start over. That principle matters. But families of missing adults often argue that it can also create dangerous delays when someone is vulnerable, frightened, or possibly in danger. Marilyn's mother, Andrée Béchard, has been very public about this issue. In a public submission about police realities in Quebec, she described the family's experience and pushed for changes, including better centralized information, stronger missing person procedures, specialized teams, and more tools for investigators in non-criminal missing person cases. CBC also reported that the family wanted Quebec to adopt powers similar to missing person legislation in other provinces, where investigators can access certain records like phone, computer, or financial information during a missing person investigation, even when no crime has yet been proven. That detail matters because Marilyn's case shows the gap families fear most. What happens when something feels urgent, but the case does not yet meet the threshold of a confirmed crime? Her family also pushed for the Sûreté du Québec, the provincial police, to take over the case. They argued that a provincial force, or Montreal police, might be better positioned to investigate leads connected to Montreal, where Marilyn had lived and where she said she felt unsafe. Those requests were rejected. From the outside, it is easy to say, why didn't they just do more? But missing person investigations involve jurisdiction, privacy law, resources, agency responsibility, and legal thresholds. The culture around this case is partly about that frustration. Families feel urgency in their bones, Institutions often require categories, proof, and process. Marilyn's case sits right in the middle of that tension. There are reasons this case has stayed in public memory. First, Marilyn was last seen doing ordinary things, walking, using an ATM, buying coffee. The normalness makes it frightening because it feels close to everyday life. Second, there was the mystery of Montreal. Marilyn's unexplained fear created a question that could not be ignored. When someone says something happened and they no longer feel safe, people want to know what it was. But because Marilyn did not explain, every possibility remains open. Third, there were the images and alleged sightings. Surveillance footage gives people something to study, even when it does not provide an answer. A possible sighting can reopen a case emotionally every time and make a disappearance feel less like an ending and more like a hidden continuation. And finally, Marilyn's family refused to let the case disappear. They held press conferences, worked with lawyers, spoke to media, pushed for legal and procedural change, honored her publicly, and kept saying her name. That is a culture, too. The culture of families who become investigators, advocates, media contacts, archivists, public speakers, and policy critics because the person they love has not. In 2022, on the 14th anniversary of Marilyn's disappearance, the Quebec City police said the investigation remained active and deployed a mobile command post at the former Café Depot location in Saint-Romuald. They invited anyone who had witnessed something or had information but had never come forward to contact them. That same year, there was also reporting about police activity at a residence in Lévis, near the area where Marilyn was last seen. French-language coverage later reported that the searches were negative and that police had not found anything there. For a family, moments like that can be brutal. A new search can feel like a door opening. Then, if nothing is found, it can feel like the door closes again without answers. But the fact that police were still taking steps more than a decade later shows that the case had not simply been forgotten. So, let's bring the confirmed pieces back together. Marilyn Bergeron was 24 years old when she disappeared. She had been living in Montreal, but shortly before she vanished, she returned to her family's home in Quebec City after saying she no longer felt safe. On February 17, 2008, she left the family home saying she was going for a walk. At 11:09 a.m., the official police timeline places her at an ATM on Boulevard de Lormière in Loretteville. At 4:03 p.m., the official police timeline places her at Café Depot in Saint-Romuald, where she used a credit card. A witness said she was alone. After that, there has been no confirmed sighting of Marilyn Bergeron. Her case remains unresolved. We do not know what happened in Montreal. We do not know whether Marilyn was afraid of a specific person, a situation, a memory, or something else entirely. We do not know how she traveled from the ATM area to Saint-Romuald. We do not know where she went after the café. We do not know whether the Ontario sightings were Marilyn. We do not know whether she died, was harmed, left voluntarily, or survived under circumstances that have never been made public. And that is the hardest kind of case. Not one with no information, but one with just enough information to create 100 doors and no key. When you look at Marilyn Bergeron's story from a distance, it can sound like a puzzle. A young woman leaves home, an ATM camera, a coffee shop, a missing credit card trail, a frightening statement about Montreal, possible sightings in Ontario, a family fighting the system. But up close, this is a family still living with an unfinished sentence. Marilyn was not just the woman at the ATM. She was not just the woman who bought coffee. She was a musician at heart, a student of media, a young woman who wanted to travel, who spoke languages, who had dreams that reached beyond where she was standing. And whatever happened on February 17th, 2008, she deserved help. She deserved to be found. She deserved for the people around her to know the truth. If Marilyn is alive and has chosen privacy, her family has said they would respect that. If someone harmed her, then her family deserves justice. And if someone knows even one small piece of what happened that day, now is the time to speak. Because somewhere between a family home, an ATM, a coffee shop, and the silence that followed, there is an answer. And Marilyn Bergeron's family has waited long enough. If you want more deep dives that focus not just on the facts, but on the psychology and the culture around cases like this, let me know which story you want next and how you think stories like this should be told. In the meantime, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.